Working Cows Podcast, episode 317. This episode is brought to you by Farming Without the Bank.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the C90 Ocean Mineral Studios. And this episode is brought to you by Farming Without the Bank.
None of you are ranching like you did 100 years ago. Why are you financing it like you did 100 years ago? The biggest part of your operation is the money that runs through your hands, and you let someone else control that. The bank gets the final say in what you get and when you pay it back. For many, this is a great relationship. Until it's not. Farming Without the Bank shows you how you can take back control of your money so that you can make the bank plan B instead of plan A. This is done by you creating your own banking system that you own and control. To learn more, tune into the Farming Without the Bank podcast and go to farmingwithoutthebank.com to get the book. Once you've read the book, Mary Jo will meet with you one-on-one and help you determine where and how to get started. She will most likely also touch on some estate transition ideas, financing ideas, business growth or startup ideas, and many other things that she has experience with from helping thousands of farmers and ranchers. So go to farmingwithoutthebank.com today to get the book and subscribe to the Farming Without the Bank podcast now.
Very excited to be joined today by Austin Maness. Austin is with an organization called Harvest Returns, and they are in the business of bringing some different strategies to the funding of agriculture and agricultural enterprises. So looking forward to a conversation about that. But this is episode 317. As I did in episode 316, I want to read to you John 3:17 this time. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. So John 3:16 and 17, very good summary of the gospel. And if you've got questions about that, want to engage in a conversation about that, I encourage you to reach out to me through the contact page at workingcows.net/contact. But for now, let us welcome to the show Austin Maness from Harvest Returns. Austin, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows podcast.
Hey, it's great to meet you, Clay. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so, I've been a member of an organization called Samaritan Ministries for quite a while now, and basically it's they don't call it health insurance, it's health sharing. And so basically, if my family has a medical need, we would submit that need to the headquarters, and then they would divide that need up among all the families it would take to pay the need off minus our portion of the share, basically. And, that got me thinking about out-of-the-box ways to finance, different projects and things like that, and kind of wondering if there was anything in the space similar to that. And then, lo and behold, here comes Harvest Returns, kind of with what you guys are doing. So kind of explain to me the process that somebody would go through as far as partnering with you guys and what that would look like on the end for the producer, and then we'll talk about kind of how all of those things get put together.
Sure. So yeah, Clay, like you mentioned, when you have a crowd of people that can pool money together, you can, like anything, when people work together, you can accomplish a lot more. And so in the crowdfunding space, a lot of that started years ago in the United States with things like GoFundMe and Kickstarter, where social crowdfunding is you're pooling money together to fill a need, a monetary need. And so once some legislation passed back in 2012 and 2013, we were able to use that method as a way to sell securities. And, what does that mean for everybody? And, in the case of what we do for the ag community is when a farmer, a rancher, an ag business needs capital, they need to update their equipment, they need to expand their operation, they need capital to do so. And so where are they going to get that? Well, can they take another loan out if they've already got some kind of debt instrument on their property or a mortgage on the house? So that becomes pretty tough. And can they get, a single investor to come in and provide $500,000, $1 million to do some of these things that these small to medium sized farms are doing? And so then, here comes crowdfunding. And what we found, my boss, Chris Raleigh, and I, we co-founded the company together. What he had found was that, hey, there's no one really doing crowdfunding in the ag space. This is 7-8 years ago. And so we thought, hey, we can fill that need. We can take this tool that's been very successful in other industries and apply it to the ag community. So we try to solve, two problems at the same time: get capital to the people that are growing our food and raising livestock, and at the same time allow investors to participate in this asset class at a much lower minimum than what was traditionally offered. And so we're trying to solve both problems at once. And that's kind of how Harvest Returns came up. So on the producer side, we are interested in those small to medium farms that are looking for capital, that have a good track record, that have some experience, that can say, hey, look, I've got a good thing going here, and I just need that capital to get me to the next level, and would love to take on some passive investors as a way to make that happen. And so that's the focus we have on the producer side, is to help those folks around the world, mostly in the United States, but around the world, to get access to that capital.
Yeah. And so I guess that's kind of one of, the first questions, I guess, that comes to my mind is how passive are these investors? What kind of is the relationship between the person who is doing the boots on the ground, actually running the operation, and then the person who is invested in the actual operation?
Sure. And producers and farmers ask us that all the time. Like, what am I going to have to deal with if I'm taking people's money? And how we set up our system is that we pool all of those investors together into a single entity, and we are the managers of that entity, we being Harvest Returns. So when the producer has taken on capital, and it can be in any form, it can be in debt, it can be in equity, it can be convertible debt, it can be profit sharing, whatever structure makes sense to everyone, we are the single point of contact for that investor entity. And so the farmer, the rancher, the business owner, they only have to deal with one person calling them on the phone or asking for a tax document or asking for, hey, what's going on? Give us an update. What's happening out there? Instead of, say, 100 people that have invested a little bit each, and they're all calling and they're all emailing, they all want their opinions to be heard. That is a service that we provide to the farmer to say, hey, look, you only have to deal with us. We are speaking on behalf of the X number of investors that came into your investment. In the same token, we are the single point of contact for all of the investors when they are looking for information, when they're looking for tax documents, when they're looking for distributions. They have to come and bother us. And I use the word bother kind of tongue in cheek. Like, they come to us. They don't need to go directly to the farmer while they're out there growing and working and making the decisions to better their farm or better their business. And so the passive part of it is we structure the deal so that the farmer maintains control. The farmer makes the decisions on how to best run his business, because that's what he or she is good at. And we inform the investors that, hey, you're a passive investor. We absolutely facilitate any kind of communication where if the investor wants to go visit the farm, which a lot of investors do, they appreciate the connection to the earth and the connection to the food system. And so they like those opportunities to take a weekend and go visit the farm if possible. And most of our farmers we've never had an issue where a farmer said, no, you can't come visit. They're very open and they want people to know what's going on, but at the same time, they really don't want someone all up in their business, telling them, hey, I want this for the cows and I want this kind of crop. And so we maintain that barrier and that conduit of information between the investor pool and the sponsor or the producer.
Sure. Yeah. And just to be clear, I guess, a lot of agriculture, by its very nature, it is connected to the land. And so, there's obviously there's no issue where people would have any necessarily property rights or ownership stake in the actual land. Is that right, or how does that work?
It just depends on the structure. And like I said, we try to be as flexible as we can when we're structuring these deals to make sure that what's better for the business, what's attractive to the investor. In some of the structures we've done, just kind of a regular debt instrument that farmers would be used to, where they're going to loan $500,000 to buy cows, to buy livestock. And we will collateralize things like the livestock. We'll collateralize things like the property. We can put a first lien on a property until the note's paid. So those are the kind of normal debt structures that farmers may be used to. But on the equity side, a farm or rancher probably has an LLC or some kind of corporate entity that is, the ownership of the property and the ownership of the business. And so we can take an equity piece in that company. And so maybe the LLC owns the land and we've invested, and now the farmer's giving, 27.3% membership interest of his LLC. So, he or she's maintaining kind of positive majority control of the entity, and the investors are coming in as passive minority holders. And so there's different structures, but like I said, we try to make it flexible to the needs of the business.
Yeah, sure. So is this done corporately? I mean, is this something that is done in other sectors, and you guys have brought this to the agricultural space? I mean, like you mentioned, Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Indiegogo, and by their nature, and maybe Indiegogo's case by their name, a lot of those tend to be individuals who are, have an idea, want to bring some product or service or something to market, and they need help to get it off the ground. So is this something, what you guys are doing, is it something that's done in corporate America? Is there an analog to this in corporate America outside of agriculture?
Yeah, so crowdfunding is being used across just about every space. I mean, you can just about invest in anything, but it is governed by securities rules, by the Securities and Exchange Commission and IRS rules. And so there's certain ways that you are allowed to do things, like when you solicit one of these offerings, you've got to be compliant with these rules. And if you are not, everybody has a bad day. And so we applied this crowdfunding tool where we are syndicating the sale of securities through, we're using the internet medium. We're using our website to do so, but we're doing that in a compliant way where we solicit to the right people. We open the offerings to the right people that meet certain qualifications. And other industries like real estate, oil and gas, precious metals. I mean, you name it. There's an industry out there that is doing some level of crowdfunding. You talked about, Samaritan thing you're doing. I recently met some folks from Angel Studios, if you've ever heard of them. Mm-hmm. And they were crowdfunding faith-based films. We've met some folks that were crowdfunding wine collections and art collections. And so there's ways to do it in just about any industry. And the web allows us to do it at a scale, as long as we are staying compliant with things and making sure that we're doing everything like the rules and the laws allow us to. This is a very powerful tool. And so a lot of industries have found it and had great success using it to reach out to numerous investors into one single project or one single offering.
So one of the things that I wonder is, does the pitch help? Is there some kind of a pitch that the individual rancher is producing and saying, this is the opportunity I've got. There's this land available for sale right next to me, or I've got this land, but I need the cattle to stock it. And they're kind of telling their story. Is there some kind of a way that whole thing gets communicated, or is it just
absolutely
a pitch deck, or how does that look?
Yeah, so when we are communicating an offering to the users on our platform, and if they're showing interest in the investment opportunity on our website, you can basically see the pitch, and what that entails is absolutely the story. Where did you come from? What's your background? Why are you the person that can do what you say you can do? So we absolutely want to communicate that the best way we can. We're also communicating, here are the financial projections that the business is showing, saying, if you invest this money with me, this is what the plan looks like. And again, it's a plan. It's not a, Moses and the tablets of stone, that's not the law. It is a plan. And so we communicate the plan. We communicate, here are all the risks that are associated with this type of operation. Here are the risks associated with this type of deal structure. And here are all the ways that we're going to mitigate all of these risks. And so transparency is the word of the day. And so we just try to show the investors and the users like, hey, this is who these people are. This is what they're trying to do. This is what they are planning and projecting they can do for you with your money. And here's the potential exit and what it looks like. And do you have any questions? And our platform allows that communication to happen front to back. And so the pitch is, for sure, people think of the pitch as like you're standing in front of Shark Tank, and there's some flavor of that, but it's not quite that, spotlight in your face. It's a little more process, and it's a lot more of like communicating your plan and your numbers properly to investors.
And it's typically not necessarily live, is that right?
For sure. Everything's hosted on our sites, and we always ask the farmer if they're comfortable with it, or is there a way we can make them comfortable with it. We'll host webinars. So if we have an offering on our site and investors like, man, I'm really interested in this, I got so many questions, we'll host live webinars where the farmer, the rancher can get on, a Zoom or any kind of conference call, and we can host that and kind of show the pitch live to everyone that we're authorized to, and then allow them to live ask questions to the farmer directly, and they can answer them like, well, what kind of processes are you using to make sure this is happening? And the farmer say, well, we're using, this type of irrigation, and we've got a contract with these folks. And so little things like that. And that gives people a little sense of connectivity between the person they're entrusting with these funds and the person that's giving them. And so it's not a necessity to be able to get up there and do a dog and pony show or song and dance to investors, but in many cases, it does help to build that level of trust between the investor and the farmer.
Who is your typical investor? Would you say you have a typical investor? And the reason I ask that is, just like what you just said, and I know it was a hypothetical example, but somebody's asking questions about the ins and outs of the type of irrigation. Do you typically get questions at that level of detail, or is it some guy in a 3-piece suit in an office building in Chicago who's doing the investing? Would you say you have a typical investor?
It's quite the spectrum, actually. I would say at the high end of the finances, we've got the folks that are managing family offices, and they're the dudes in the 3-piece suits that probably drove a Ferrari to work or something like that. So that's one end. The other end of the financial spectrum is, I kind of think of my own grandmother, but like a 70-ish, 80-ish year old widow who, oops, I'm living longer than I thought I would. I need my IRA to go just a little longer, and ag is a risk level that I'm okay with. And I have just like $5,000 or $10,000 that I can put into a project. So, that's the financial spectrum. On the industry, professionalism spectrum, we've noticed a lot of cattle producers invest in our cattle projects. Mm. I think that the reason is that they understand that business, and when they look through the pitch or the offering from the cattle rancher, they're like, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about because I know what I'm talking about, and I like his numbers, and I'm going to invest in this. And so we do see some of that. But we also see folks that are just, they grew up in the concrete jungle. They don't even understand how tomatoes are grown, but they're fascinated by it. They see the numbers. They believe in the people that are going to do it, and they're going to invest in that tomato farm. So it's quite the spectrum of, professional backgrounds and financial availability. But we try to have a deal for everybody. That's one of the things we strive to do. We try to have something that any one of those people in that spectrum would be interested in. Same for return wise, risk wise, types of agriculture. We try to have a little bit of everything to capture all of those different types of investors.
Sure. So could it be that the person comes in and they are the sole investor? I mean, does that ever happen, or is it generally a team that's managing the lift?
If there was a situation where a single investor was coming into approaching a project or a farm, that can typically be done without our assistance.
Sure.
Sometimes, we're there to assist the farmer, especially when you're getting all the paperwork together, because there is a lot of paperwork. And that's kind of what we do. But typically, we're a crowdfunding platform. So bringing in the crowd with smaller dollar amounts to make a larger investment pool, that's our typical method. But if we were approached by a farmer and a single investor and they just said, "Hey, can you just make this happen for us and put the paperwork together?" We absolutely could do that very, very quickly, just to make sure everybody's happy. But our typical service that we're providing for the investors is that, hey, we've done some due diligence on this project. You've got to do your own too, but you can believe us, and here we're going to show it to you. This is the due diligence we've already done on this project. Now you go into yours. And then, the same, the other direction for this farmer. It's like, hey, we're doing all of these filings we have to do with the state, filings we have to do with the federal SEC to make sure that, we're compliant with, the process of selling securities. So, we're providing a service in both directions. And that is typically for a crowd, two or more folks coming in and participating.
Yeah, and I often joke, tongue-in-cheek, and I know I sign a waiver every year that says that I've represented my numbers correctly, but I often joke that I could probably figure out how to file my taxes, but I pay somebody else to prepare my taxes so that I don't end up in federal prison. And I think that kind of the service that you guys are providing is a lot the same, where you've got this platform and you've got this audience of people who are looking for opportunities to invest specifically in agriculture, and then you're also bringing them and giving opportunity for producers to put their operation in front of this audience and kind of manage that relationship, but also the legal side of it with all of the filings and things to open up the door for those investments to flow. Is that kind of mainly what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do not provide legal advice and we do not provide investment advice, but the conversations that people have with us typically save them a lot of money when they do finally go talk to their attorney or their investment advisor. And so, we're very transparent about that, what we are allowed to do and what our licenses and registrations are. And so we tell the farmers that, like, hey, you're going to have to connect with a corporate attorney, and you're going to have to connect with, some kind of attorney. When you go to talk to that person, ask these questions, and because these are the things that you're going to want to know, and provide this information. That'll save both of you time. And, when they're billing you by the hour, we can save you some time just in efficiencies. And so that'll help you in the long run. Same on the investment advice side. We do not say this deal's better than this deal. And we do not tell investors, you should definitely, this is guaranteed. Like, we would never say anything like that. Because that's, that you're leading investors, falsely if you're using that kind of words. And so we don't do that. We provide the investors, here is the menu. You get to decide what you like. We'll answer any questions that you have about it, but we're not going to point you like an investment advisor would say, hey, I think you should try X, Y, and Z because this is your kind of profile. We let the investor be self-directed, be a big boy, as we say, put on their big boy pants and make the decisions for themselves.
And I imagine that the answer to this next question is somewhat similar, but your producers kind of span the gamut too, I'm just guessing, from Western ranches that are on larger landscapes to vegetable producers in the East who are selling direct to consumer. Is that true? Do you guys have kind of a wide ranging portfolio of operations in your cabbie?
Absolutely. And some of the stuff, I'm a guy that grew up in the country and saw all kinds of farming growing up. Being in the military, I traveled the world and saw all different kinds of farming. And there's still some things that surprise me that come to us and say, "Hey, I'm trying to raise capital. This is what I'm doing." Like, wow, that's really a thing. That's pretty awesome. But what I would say is, the things that we typically don't deal with are your row crop farmers, your soybean, your corn, your wheat, things like that. Those large farms in the Midwest, they kind of have their financial system already in place, and so they don't typically deal with the crowdfunding kind of capital raise process. But we've got orchards, we've got indoor hydroponic tomato farms, we've got cocoa plantations, we've got hazelnut plantations. We've got aquaculture, folks that are growing fish indoors. We've got, we've talked to so many different things. I'm trying to remember some of them, but I would say one of our more popular offerings that we've done has been livestock. We've done some debt offerings with cattle producers. Investors really seem to like that structure and the timeliness of it. The producers seem to enjoy it because it provides capital and they're able to kind of, pun intended, they're able to beef up their operation using other people's money. And the way the beef prices are right now, they're not having trouble selling most of their trouble is like, how do I get more cows faster? Mm-hmm. And usually it's with other people's money. And so we've just seen a lot of success with that over the years. And we enjoy the cattle, we call them cattle notes. We enjoy the cattle notes because we're able to provide the investors things that they're expecting, like tax documents and communications and distributions. And for the cattle producer, they appreciate, like, hey, I just call these guys, we set up an offering, we do the homework, we get the numbers, and then all of a sudden I've got $1 million check in my hand and I can go buy some cows before this next sale. And as long as I keep communicating and keep the distributions happening and those interest payments happening, everybody's happy. And so that's been kind of our favorite lately.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsor today, Farming Without the Bank. None of you are ranching like you did 100 years ago. Why are you financing it like you did 100 years ago? The biggest part of your operation is the money that runs through your hands, and you let someone else control that. The bank gets the final say in what you get and when you pay it back. For many, this is a great relationship, until it's not. Farming Without the Bank shows you how you can take back control of your money so that you can make the bank plan B instead of plan A. This is done by you creating your own banking system that you own and control. To learn more, tune into the Farming Without the Bank podcast and go to farmingwithoutthebank.com to get the book. Once you've read the book, Mary Jo will meet with you one-on-one and help you determine where and how to get started. She will most likely also touch on some estate transition ideas, financing ideas, business growth or startup ideas, and many other things that she has experience with from helping thousands of farmers and ranchers. So go to farmingwithoutthebank.com today to get the book and subscribe to the Farming Without the Bank podcast now.
Kind of along those lines, give me a sense of the time scale of the typical investment, or maybe it ranges. Are you doing long-term notes on land and then short-term notes on cattle and other things that turn around a little faster, or is it limited more to the short term?
The cattle, it goes back to like what makes sense for the business, because that's the heart of it. So we've done notes as short as 6 months. We've done notes as long as 4 or 5 years. It just depends on what specifically that operator is doing and what they're doing with the funds. When it's typically just like, hey, I'm going to borrow some money, I'm going to buy some cows, I'm going to sell those cows, and I'm going to pay you your money back. Those are around 1 to 2 to 3 years, and the way that interest rates are bouncing all over the place and spiking here and there. Sometimes a 2-year note makes more sense than a 1-year note, and we will have that conversation with a cattle producer to say, hey, what makes more sense for you? And then we go to the investor pool and go, hey, we think this is what investors are going to like because it locks in this interest rate for 24 months. Or, hey, these investors are very interested to get their principal back as soon as possible because they want to do something with it next year. Maybe we do a 1-year note. And so we do that just to make sure we're making everybody as happy as possible. And so, again, it goes back to the structure of the business. But the debt instruments we try to keep a little bit shorter. And then some of the riskier plays, especially in the ag tech space, we're doing equity and convertible debt. Those are more your 4 or 5 year runways until exit. So we just those are a little bit different structure, but I'd say for cattle notes 1 to 3 years is pretty typical.
Sure. And so there wouldn't be like a long-term purchase of land type of a deal. Is that right?
It just depends. I mean, we've done some land purchases with convertible debt and with debt, and the idea is that yes, they're paying their cost of capital to get this debt now because maybe they want to buy their neighbor's property or something like that, and then the idea is that yes, interest rates should go back down in say year 2 or 3. They'll refinance with a bank, especially after they've been able to make some cash flow happen over 2 or 3 years. They'll refinance, they'll buy out that note, and then they'll move forward with a bank's note after they're a little more established and their cash flows are a little more predictable. But when it comes to collateralizing things, that's an interesting world, and I leave the finance guys to with the big brains to kind of figure out what makes better sense as far as risk return profiles.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Could you give me a sense of some of the more successful models that you've seen, some of the things that you've seen that have really worked well from an agriculture perspective? And I'm not afraid to talk about things other than cows. One of my favorite episodes was with a guy named Steve Strassheim out of Iowa, and it's called The Most Profitable Acre, and it's about basically the return he's generating with a garden. He's gardening and selling produce, and so and some of the per acre returns, would be real hard to do that with a cow. So, but could you talk to me about some of the more successful models that you've seen as far as from a production standpoint?
Yeah, on the production side, again, I never try to be surprised at things, but some things still surprise me. But just to give you some examples of the companies we've already, invested with, again, the cattle side, I think I've talked, at length about those. We've got an operation in Omaha that basically the farm is in the basement and they're growing indoor basil, mint, and other kind of, microgreens like that. The restaurant is upstairs. And so it's a very nice restaurant. It's one of those restaurants that you probably make reservations for if you want to get in on a Saturday night. And you go down to the restaurant, you order let's say a mint julep from the bar. They're going to pick the mint right off the plant and put it in your drink. When you order a salad, that lettuce or those little greens that went in your salad came off got picked right before your salad was made. And so that is their shtick. They're growing stuff and they're putting it on your plate. And so the produce doesn't travel any more than a few feet as opposed to across the country. And while you're waiting for your table, you can go tour the farm downstairs. And so that business model is working very well, and that restaurant's doing very well. And so we're pretty happy we invested with that. So that was a good success story. Another one out of New York City are some mushroom growers. And they go around and collect food waste. The restaurants pay them to take the food waste away from the restaurants. They take it back to their facility. They grow mushrooms out of it, and then they sell the mushrooms back to those same restaurants. And so the restaurant is their double customer. They got this double cash flow going. I'm like, that is genius. So that's a great one. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. We've got some tech deals that are doing very well. And some other farms that are, kind of growing and expanding, and, they've got good updates, that come regularly. But yeah, each business model is its own puzzle piece. And so it's great to see some very innovative thinkers out there that are vertically integrating their entire operation from, from inputs to outputs to cash flow. And so we appreciate those forward thinkers. And, we've even worked with some cattle brokers that are buying and selling cows. They're buying cows and they're selling them to a distributor, or they're buying cows from one producer and providing them to the other producer. And so the models out there are infinite, and we really appreciate when we see something we haven't seen before.
Sure. Yep. And that's cool. I like I said, I really enjoy it. And I think that it's just, there's probably the land that you're on, as far as what I would guess is the average listener of the Working Cows podcast, the land that you're on is probably capable of more than you're doing with it now. And there's these opportunities, mushrooms or microgreens or whatever, that you could do and not have to own a bunch more land than you already own, but maybe some infrastructure and maybe the network to sell those products. But there's opportunities. And so I really like to make sure that we're giving people opportunities to share different ways of thinking and looking at the opportunities that exist just on what you already have.
Yeah, we're working with some young folks out in East Texas that are, combining some species of animals to regenerate the earth. This regenerative grazing is definitely growing in popularity amongst investors, and it's obviously good for the planet. But mobile chicken houses that the cows follow around. And so the chicken house moves across the earth. Of course, the manure goes in there, and then the grass grows thicker and greener, and the cows come behind and graze right behind it. And they can use they can put a lot of animals on a smaller tract of land than a normal cattle ranch or chicken farm, because they're the way they rotate it and the way they monitor it, and both the chicken manure, the cow manure, and how the animals and the hooves and how all that works actually puts more biology back into the soil, helps hold moisture, reduces drought timeline. And I was like, this is great. I mean, people are figuring this stuff out. Doesn't matter how old they are, young, old, and they're doing good things. Not only for our soil, but they're also doing it profitably and making investors happy as well.
Yeah. Yep. And you're speaking my language. That's kind of right in the wheelhouse of what the Working Cows podcast is here for. It's we're here to provide producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm challenging practices and thinking out of the box, doing things differently and doing things profitably. That's the main thing that we're talking about here, is trying to figure out how to make a better return on the assets and the investments that we have as ranchers, so that the next generation is intrigued and interested in coming back and being a part of it. And a big part of that is regenerative grazing and regenerative stewardship of the land. And so definitely really hitting right where we're talking as far as the Working Cows podcast and the audience that listens to it. So really appreciate that. Can you give me some sense of the scale? And what I mean by that is how long have you been around? How many operations have you funded? How many investors have jumped in? Some of those things.
Sure. Yeah. And I always think of man, I need to make myself a cheat sheet doing a podcast. So I got the cool bullet points to talk about. But our company's been around. It'll be 7 years here coming in October. Chris and I started this up. Our platform's been running hot. I would say, I think early 2018, late 2017 is when we turned the machine on. Since then, we've raised around $32 million for about 50 different projects. And the projects range anywhere in between, $200,000 all the way up to $4 or $5 million. So that's kind of our sweet spot for those small, medium farms. We've got, I feel like the last number I saw, it was around 13 or 14,000 users on our site. And then, those users could be investors if they participate. We've pushed out $7 or $8 million in returns back to investors. And so it's ag. So, these are typically slower deals than, say, your real estate or some of your other, oil and gas and minerals kind of deals. So A lot of these exits takes time unless you're, the shorter notes. But we expect those to keep cascading over the years of deals we did 4 or 5 years ago that are just now exiting. So that distribution back to investors grows just about every quarter. And so that's kind of the scale of us. We're a small, efficient team. We've got 7 employees, and we typically have 1 or 2 interns every year, just because we like to keep the university folks connected to us, and those are some very high energy, high motivated young people that are interested in the entrepreneurship space and in the ag finance space. So we keep a quick and fast team, and love doing the podcast and just trying to educate folks into like, hey, this is where your food comes from, and this is why you should invest in it. Especially with what we've seen in the world the past few years.
Yeah, and we're on the other side of that here with the Working Cows podcast. So this is where your money can come from, and this is why you should consider harvest returns for the expansion of your operation. So maybe go ahead and make that pitch.
For sure, I mean, it's basically if you're a producer, if you're a farmer, rancher, and you're limiting yourself to just one source of capital, say it's the family bank that your granddaddy's been going to, you are literally limiting yourself. And I recommend that you don't do that, because there will be weird things that happen in the world, like pandemics and wars and random things that you can't control. And so you've got to diversify your capital streams if you want your way of life to continue into your grandchildren's generation. And so we are one of those things. We're not the silver bullet. We're not the thing that, is going to guarantee you success in life or success in your business, but we are a pathway to capital. We're a pathway to educating the consumer, the person that's eating that food or buying those products at the store. We are providing that connectivity so that both the farmer and the end user are working on the same information of like, what's happening, how is this produced, how is this affecting my world, and in a bigger view, as opposed to just like, hey, I just buy the stuff that comes on the shelf at the grocery store. Well, it helps to know where that comes from and how it was produced, and is there any garbage in it, or can you trust this producer that they know what they're doing? And so that's why that's our pitch to producers is diversify your capital streams, work with us, help educate the consumer. And oh, by the way, if it goes well, you can always come back, because when the best investor is an investor that's gotten paid back. And so we appreciate those producers that have come back and done a second and third raise with us, because they've built the trust with the investor pool, and the investors come back running. They usually double down their money when they've had a good experience.
So just one quick production note here. Shout out to the Perkins County Fair. I'm sitting in their grandstands borrowing their electricity to do this, and they are getting ready for the Ranch Rodeo, which I think takes place on Friday or Saturday night. So they're trimming some weeds around here. So if you hear some background noise, that's what's going on. But just got a couple of more questions here, and it's kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, but maybe more to the point of, can you give me an example of where your service is the better option over a bank, or why somebody might come to you instead of a bank? Could you just be specific about that?
Sure. I think if we're using the comparison with a bank, the word that jumps out 100% is flexibility. When a producer is working with a bank, that is an institution, and they have books and books and books of rules and things that they cannot do, because they're an institution and they have to follow certain rules, and they're very risk averse. And so they are not flexible. And so when you take out a mortgage on your home, it doesn't matter what is happening in your life, you will make that payment every month, or you will be without a house. When you work with a system like ours, depending on how we structure it, debt, equity, whatever it looks like, we are the flexible option. And so we are making the deal structure that benefits the business, not just some plan we pulled off the shelf that they used 1,000 years ago. And so we provide a flexible solution to getting that capital. And we and investors understand that, hey, things like drought and things like tornadoes and things like disease happen. let's address them, let's mitigate them. But we understand when those kind of things happen, and we are going to shoulder that risk with the producer, as opposed to it all being on the farmer family to make those bank payments. And so if you'd like that flexibility, and if you'd like to be able to structure something a little more on your terms instead of something the bank's just going to pull off the shelf, that's a bigger reason to work with us. And oh, by the way, working with us usually helps you get into a better relationship with your bank. When they see that you've got investment capital coming in, you can take that to the bank and say, hey, look, I've got people that believe in me. Now you need to also. And that's usually a better conversation after you've got some investors on your team.
Sure. Very good. So kind of last question here, and that is what's next? What's next? You know, and I know that's an impossible question from the pandemic, war, interest rate perspective. But so I mean, just give me a sense of what you're thinking and your strategy about managing for the future in that regard. But then also, what's next for harvest returns? What are you guys looking at? What's the future? What are you thinking about for, hey, this is another area or another way that we could serve our clients?
Sure. So I'd say, just in the ag community, when we throw down the chicken bones or look at the crystal ball, producers have to produce more with less. And I hated when people told me that in the Army, like do more work with less people. Like, okay. But you got to figure that out. The arable land that we can use to grow stuff is getting smaller. There's just more people on the planet every day. So you've got to figure it out. How do you increase your efficiency? How do you improve your processes? How do you do more with less? So you've got to figure that out. You've also got to speed things up and shorten distances. You've got to produce things faster, and you've got to cut the distance between where it's grown or raised and where it's sold. So you got to figure that out. And the people that are innovating that and the people that are figuring out, that's where the opportunities are. And that can be in the United States, and that can be abroad as well. And so we're looking for those innovators. We're looking for, young and old, doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you've got that passion, if you got that drive, and you've got the good ideas, we're looking for you. For us, for Harvest Returns, we have more producers and farmers and ranchers coming at us than we can handle. We've got more deals coming at us than we can service with investment capital. And so we are trying to figure out how can we better service the ag community, because there's definitely a need out there, and we're trying to get to a point where we can invest a lot faster, increase our investment velocity, and also bring in other sources of capital in our user base to better service the ag community. So we're looking at different avenues, whether that's a fund structure or a partnership with other like companies, but we're working on some things that I think people are going to be excited about here in the next 6 or 12 months. But that's our goal, is to increase investment velocity, get capital into these producers' hands as fast as possible so that they can get to work and show the world, hey, there's an opportunity here. Yes, you need to get into all the different industries and invest in all different types of things and diversify your portfolio. Ag definitely has to be a piece of your portfolio. If you're going to go into the next generation or so with your wealth.
Sure. So is there anything that I missed? Anything else that you would like to say specifically to producers? I mean, that's the vast majority of people who are going to hear this, is people who would be in the market for ag capital to expand their operation or to diversify their operation. So is there anything else that you'd like to say specifically to them?
Yeah, and I would say this, I studied engineering in college. I was in the Army, and it's kind of counterintuitive, especially if you're a producer out there. But don't be afraid to reach out to us or someone like us if you've got a half of an idea. And I get frustrated when I talk to a producer that says, well, let me work on, I got to get the pretty pitch deck, and I got to work on it. Like, hey, come talk to us. Let us help you get through that process. And don't be afraid to come up with half a bucket is I guess the best way to say it. If you've got something you're thinking about, if you got something you're working on, come talk to us, have a conversation with us. We will talk to you and say, hey, let's point you in the right direction. So when you're ready, we're ready for you, and we can get working. So don't let it stew too long. Even if you've got, strike while the iron's hot, all the different cliches, but, come talk to us, even if you're just thinking about something, because we can share our successes and our bumps and bruises with you and say, hey, look, don't, avoid that kind of stuff. Maybe think about this, and we can kind of point a producer in the right direction to get them set up for success.
Very good. Very good. Well, the show notes page for today will be workingcows.net/317. workingcows.net/317 is the show notes page for today. And so anything you want put there, Austin?
Just harvestreturns.com. And then of course we've got quite a few social media, Facebooks, Instagrams, Twitters, all the social medias, but that's the best way to find us.
Okay. Sounds good. Austin, thanks for your time today.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Clay.
Very good stuff there. Really appreciate that perspective and the strategy, and really think it's a unique way of looking at it, and good to see more business type strategies and practices being applied to agriculture, and maybe giving some people the opportunity to be involved that might at a bigger scale than maybe they would be able to because of the limitations of their last name or whatever limitation they have, not inheriting a place that they can operate and run. So really looking forward to next week on the Working Cows podcast. Ben Gottschall reached out to me. He's been a guest on the Working Cows podcast, and I think quite a few other regenerative agriculture, cow-focused regenerative agriculture podcasts as well. But he reached out to me and said, hey, I got a young lady that you should talk to. She's doing great work here at Wolf's Neck, and she's been part of this transition to a grazing dairy, and she's been involved in dairy in other sizes and scales and strategies as well, and has a real good perspective on these things. So looking forward to talking to Kate next week at his recommendation. But before that, we're going to release another bonus episode of the Working Cows podcast with the Understanding Ag bonus episodes we've been doing. And this one, we're going to talk to Monty Bottens. And Monty is the host of the Ag Emerge podcast, and he is also the leader of that business at Ag Emerge and some other organizations that he is helping to lead. And we're going to have a conversation with him about his journey into soil health and about how that journey can inform the journeys of others. So looking forward to both of those episodes coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.